like to settle working from home? How do you create an environment where you can be productive, both for yourself as an employee and also for organizations that are having to lead individuals and teams that are now remote? Perhaps you don't have experience doing that. So many questions, so many opportunities, so many challenges. We're going to talk today to the co-founder of Nearsoft, which sponsors the show here on Dojo Live, who has been very successful in creating a culture for the past 13 years of individuals that are very self-empowered. And we're going to share some thoughts and ideas that hopefully you can get some value from it. Please welcome Matt Perez to the show and my co-host today. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Hi. How are you?
I also, good. So I'm here from Los Angeles. Matt's in San Jose. Laura is in Hermosillo, and Kim is also in Hermosillo, Mexico. Thanks for joining us today. I'm looking forward to this conversation, Matt. You and I have had many chats about how organizations could adapt principles that essentially treats people like adults, and people act like adults. And in essence, there's some self-accountability required to make this whole thing work.
Right.
So please introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about yourself and what gave birth to this idea for you to try to create an environment where no matter where we are, whether we're home or in the office or on the beach, we can still be productive. Can you give us a little background about yourself? Thanks.
So I've been in technology for many years. You can tell I'm rather on the old side, and over 40 years probably. And we co-founded, and mostly on the product side of things. So building software products and hardware products and software and hardware, and I've been back and forth. In about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, really, or a little before I started Nearsoft, it occurred to me that instead of going to faraway places for outsourcing, you could do it nearby. And that's how the whole idea of Nearsoft came about. And from the beginning, Roberto Martinez, the other co-founder, and I had the same intentions, good intentions, no really good ideas. Just let's make it. The way that Roberto said it was, let's build a company that works for everybody, not just us. And that was really good. I was very much into not having titles, and so it wasn't until we read Maverick by Ricardo Semler that things got more organized, and we had more of a direction, and we knew what to do. And from that point on, it's really been, you said I've been very successful in creating this culture. Not really. I've been very successful in watching this culture create itself from the many people that have made it happen, and are still making it happen. It's changing on a constant basis.
So, Matt, in your opinion, what are the challenges right now with a lot of companies basically being forced to work from home, and many of them not being prepared? I actually saw a memo from a company that shall remain unnamed to their employees, which was almost like the kind of thing you would write to your kid about how they should be accessible, how many times a day they need to check in with their manager.
Wow.
It was disconcerting to read it. I was like, seriously? These are adult men and women who can figure out how to be productive. What do you think has been is some of the challenges organizations are going to face? And in your opinion, how can they overcome that? What are some good ideas and some to do or not to do's, if you think?
Well, yeah, we've seen those memos, right? The ones that says check with your manager when you go to the bathroom, when you get up from the bathroom, when you go to eat, when you don't go. I mean, it's silly, and this it's a huge concern over productivity. And we had a good meeting the other day, and one of the guys around the table said, "Don't worry about that. Productivity is going to go down first, and then it's going to go back to normal." So if you haven't done it before, working from home is different. It's not as if you stay home for a day or two. You're staying home for a couple of weeks, and because you have to. That's a big difference. Now, as to how companies can overcome that issue of control, you and I have a long history of talking about these issues of what I call co-management and co-ownership. So moving in that direction is something that's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. But the sooner you can start thinking along those lines, the better. I think this is a great opportunity for reconsidering the whole thing about working from home and not having to watch people every hour of the day. I mean, having an office is a good thing. It's having a place where people can come and socialize. Many of the people I had threw out a questionnaire a couple of days ago, and a lot of the comments were, "Oh, I miss my friends. I miss," particularly the other people who are not in my team. So I talked to people in my team, but what about the other people that we just meet casually in the eating area and stuff like that? So there's an aspect of socialization that offices are good for, but not. I mean, normally we use them as a way of watching over people and stuff like that, and companies have to get over it.
So I want to open it up to questions from the audience. If you have questions, just post them right on the stream where you're watching us, or you can post them on at Dojo Live on Twitter. Love to get your questions for Matt. We do have a couple from the audience, but before we go there, I'd like you to, if you could, just touch a little bit more on this idea of co-managed and co-owned. It sounds to me what you're suggesting is it'll be a lot easier to manage people or to lead an environment where people are working, whether they're from home or anywhere else for that matter, if the principles on how the organization is structured changes.
Right.
Can you touch on that a little bit? And you said something, this could also be an opportunity for organizations to relook at how they actually are structured that could serve them no matter whether people are from home or from an office or from anywhere else. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, I could go on for hours about that, but I'll try to. Co-management is my terminology for what's normally called self-management, but self-management has a lot of baggage and stuff like that, or freedom-centric, or having fun at work, and all of those are aspects of what I call co-management. And why? Because self-management, the company doesn't manage itself. People co-manage with each other. What makes the overall thing work. And as we know, it's a lot of work. It doesn't come for free. It's not just fire all the managers and you're done. No, it's managers do a lot of good things, except they're also saddled with the power of firing and hiring and making decisions that they're not equipped to do. Nobody is equipped to do. On the other hand, we're all equipped to do fragments of that. So that's the co-management part. The ownership part is a little more dramatic, more drastic. And that is that so long as you have an owner, a fiat owner, he's the boss. Ultimately, he's the boss. And it's usually he. I'm saying that on purpose. So you need to find a way to broaden ownership and make it more available to everybody. And that's more dramatic. That's something that takes a lot more work and a lot more thinking. So, and a lot more resistance from companies. But again, eventually we'll get there. It's just a matter of time.
Thanks, Matt. Let's take in a couple of questions. Laura, I think you have a few questions from the audience queued in. Let's take those from Matt, and then we'll continue on that topic a little bit more.
Okay. Perfect. So the first question from the audience we have is, Matt, in your opinion, what's the biggest downside of working from home and how should we mitigate?
Oh, so like I said, I threw out a questionnaire, 4 questions, very simple questions, the other day, and got about 20% responses, which was very good. And the biggest hassle is people who have small kids. I mean, less than 7 are the ones that are having the hardest time. They have to get up early to make up, to kind of start working before they wake up, and then they lose a couple of hours, and so it's hard to concentrate because the day is all fractured. For people that are new to working from home, having that discussion with their spouses or their parents or whoever it is that they live with, of saying, "Hey, I'm going to be working from home, and yes, they pay me, and yes, I'm doing real work, and but I'm not here for you. It's I'm working, so you have to, leave me be, but also have time. Be cognizant of the fact that you're home, and again, have protocols for when you go to the refrigerator to pick up stuff. Be conscious that people are going to, family are going to say, ask you for things and stuff. But that's what people are having the most trouble with, adapting to working in a family environment. Other people have been doing it for a long time and they're having a great time. Everybody's discovering that, oh, I got all this extra time, a commute time, and I'm not so frazzled when I get to work because I'm right here. And people are doing all kinds of things with family, with reading. It's also very important to create a kind of a routine. Get up, get dressed, take a shower. Whatever you did in the morning to go to the office, keep doing it because that's important. Okay, don't change from one set of pajamas to another set of pajamas because that doesn't count. I've been doing this for 15 years, so to me, it's a no-brainer. But I had to learn. I remember having to learn the whole thing of how to establish protocols with my wife and things like that. So that aspect is very important.
Okay, great. So this part of having kids, these people that have kids that are working from home, there's another question: how to deal with limited bandwidth while several people are working from home and or have kids streaming video.
Right. So what's the question? I'm sorry.
How to deal with limited bandwidth.
I could chime in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Kim. You would be a good one for that.
Perfect timing.
Matter of fact, I'm currently holed up in my daughter's bedroom, talking about working from home. This was the quietest place that was unoccupied to connect to this call. So I think that's part of the idea of just being creative and flexible. So the idea of limited bandwidth, and especially with kids and screen time, yes, to me that has been a problem. What I've done personally or tried to do is, first of all, converse with my child who is, old enough, my 8-year-old who can comprehend. And I'll just say, you know what, Camila, I've got a phone call coming up in 10 minutes. So you're going to have to get off. And then, of course, there's an email, well, what am I going to do? And I'll try to help her be creative, right? Like, go read a book, or here's your coloring book, or I don't know, maybe I take advantage of this is the time that she gets into the shower and those types of things. The 2-year-old, thankfully, she's not too much of a TV addict yet. I have had to get to the idea of there's no other option for me sometimes than to just kind of put her in a safe space, like her crib or a play pen, and sort of, have her there and, peek in every now and then. I think for me, that's been one of the things that I've had to learn over time, adapting to working from home when necessary. First of all, I'm very thankful to work for a company like Nearsoft that has had the working from home policy long before anything like this extreme circumstances made it necessary. As a working mother, I very much appreciate that, and it makes it capable for me to sort of find balance, right, between life and work. One of the things, though, that I think is really important is to not be too hard on yourself. This idea of I don't have to do 100% all the time, right? If I can get by in these next few days, whether that means the state of my home and the number of dishes that are in the sink, or not answering an email until 8 o'clock at night, I just have to get used to the fact that I'm doing the best that I can, and that's okay. And I think also just have open communication with your clients, coworkers, and people. Explain the circumstances. I open up a lot of times like, hey, you guys, you know what? I'm working from home. My kids are here. We might be interrupted, or if you hear noises, that's what's going on. Apologize in advance. And I just find that being real with people helps the whole thing from the very start.
Yeah, we've had your daughter Zoe participate a couple of times on the Dojo Live show. So,
Yeah.
you know, I want to share something myself. I've been working remote and from home on and off for 30 years, and one thing I've learned is, to your point earlier, Matt, I think it's important to try to establish or at least negotiate boundaries with family members, because sometimes when you're home, there's the assumption, your daddy's home or mommy's home, and you know I can just talk to them anytime. Or even the spouse will say, "Hey, let's can you start having a conversation while you're in the middle, perhaps drafting an email." So I found it important, find a space if you can that's like your sacred space. This is where I'm going to work from, and establish some boundaries with family members. So, you know, between these hours, this is my time to just be focused on this, and just, you know, try to leave me alone unless there's something urgent. So I found those to be very good practice. But I'm more curious to learn more about tips we can give for leaders, right? First time managers, supervisors that have never had to deal with what's happening right now. And the tendency is, again, to try to control and be on top of things. What tips could they apply right now that could empower people to feel, you know, like they're not being micromanaged, and it's already deflating enough what's happening. So, you know, how do you change the relationship that they have on what is considered effective working hours, or the level of productivity and the expectation, so that leaders can learn to adapt to this environment? What are some tips they can apply right now that doesn't require major change in organizational structure today?
Right. Well, if you're just a manager of a small group, say, 3 to 7 people, but it doesn't matter. Just a manager. You don't have to change the whole company. The first thing to do is how could you make sure that the team is aligned and working together on one thing if you're not there? As in, can you take a vacation and still will people still be doing their work, right? So one thing that we learned a long time ago is that, like I said, it's not just not having managers. That seems to be a temptation of let's go flat or something like that. The more important thing is defining a mission. That we and not something that you write on a piece of paper and you send an email to everybody, but rather as a group, what is our mission? What do we have to do, etc. And have a discussion or 2 or 3 around that. But eventually, this bring it down to 3 to 5 points, and define a mission. That's the first thing. Once you have a mission, that is the boss. You're no longer the boss. That mission is the boss. And that same, if every team, every other manager did that, eventually you end up with an organization that has a grander mission, and everybody can look at that as being the top boss and figure out what to do from there. So people want to be aligned. When we say belonging is a big thing for us humans, being part of a team, it doesn't mean just hanging out with people. That could be conformity and just hanging along. And it could be that I'm enslaved and being pulled by the chain. But the kind of thing that we want, the kind of belonging that we want, is the one where we're pulling in the same direction. Well, we have to know what that direction is. That's what the mission is. I mean, it's great if you can establish a vision and a purpose for the whole company. But even if you don't, for just doing it for your group is very important. And not just for any ideological reason, but for yourself, for your sanity. That would be the first step. And that's the most important step. Seems to me.
What great advice. We do have a couple of more audience questions, but I love that advice. So if you're a manager for the first time, leading a team that's remote, this is not the time to write memos with orders. This is the time to connect with people, talk about what you want to accomplish, change more towards a mission-oriented team, and make that your boss and your guiding principle.
Right.
Love that advice. Love that advice.
I think
yeah, we have a few more questions, right, from the audience? I think we have
Sorry,
two more.
I just wanted to add in there. I think the idea of prioritizing as well. Once you have a main goal or mission that you can focus on, it helps people to prioritize their own needs, right? Going back to this idea of I can't maybe make 100% right now because I have a 2-year-old screaming. But I can do 80%, and this is the most important things, and that's what I'm going to work on first, and that's going to help push the whole team and the whole group and the whole mission forward, even if you can't check everything off of that list.
You can be an adult, an autonomous adult. Okay.
Yeah, Matt, I got a question real quick. I know there are questions from the audience, but what I'd like to ask you is, I know my teammates have covered pretty well on what it takes to work from home, you know, and working with the family and dealing with family situations. But in regards to working as a team, when we're all working remote, like we're doing today, I think there's a challenge. And you mentioned it in your tagline. You say people acting as adults, you know, treating each other like adults. I think that's an important part of the tagline. My question is, how do you think we should handle remote situations when some of the teammates might not be acting as how can I say this, as adults precisely, right? So how can we deal with that? If we are a self-managed organization, how do we deal with that? How can we fix it if no one is holding somebody else accountable because they're not acting like adults? So how do we handle that? How do we fix it?
And again, this is basic to Nearsoft, so it's easy for us to forget. But transparency is very important. Now, it's very important. It's also very difficult, right? Transparency is both ways. The group has to be transparent with the individual. The individual has to be vulnerable, transparent with the team. So when somebody is not acting up to your expectations, given the mission, and we have to do all this stuff, you have to talk to the person and point that out to them. And usually 90% of the time you find out that there's something going on. People are not slacking off because it could be because they have a 2-year-old that's sick at home, but they didn't think of mentioning it. It wasn't professional to mention it or whatever. And but you have to be ready to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, asking those questions, saying, "Hey, I noticed that you're not doing as many check-ins as you were doing last week. What's going on?" Who knows? You'll find out what's going on. But first, you have to be an adult. It's the only thing you have control of. It's you, your person, your behavior.
Yeah.
So it's got to start with you, and put that out there and talk to the other person. And the other person may say, "I don't feel like I'm being a freeloader. What do you mean?" And then you get into the detail of it, and maybe you're wrong. Maybe what you consider freeloading is, I don't know, something else. It's like somebody taking care of their family during the day and doing the work at night. That's more than reasonable. That's what I would expect. Family first.
I think it goes to one of our values as Nearsoft, right? This idea of teamwork, like this idea of being transparent, willing to be vulnerable, and also willing to help somebody out, right? Like, what can I do? Could I help you if you aren't unable to get this accomplished, or how can we be flexible, right? And having those conversations as a team is also very important.
I will point out something else to that question, Carlos, and your comment, Matt. Moving from a more traditional corporate structure to this environment, that's a typical question. How do you hold people accountable? How do I know what people are doing? Whether they're following through or doing what they're supposed to do. And I'll say this is just my own personal experience. In traditional organizations where there's a boss and they may have several people working in that organization, you can actually hide out. You can easily hide out in those organizations, right? Because you might need to provide an update once a week or once a month, whatever. It's easy to hide out. In an environment where it becomes mission driven, where the entire team has agreed together, this is what we're going to do this week, you can't hide out because your teammates are going to call you out the minute you're not delivering something you've committed to jointly as a team. So what I've learned over time is to realize, so the more the team is involved, the more the team commits to things, the less likely someone's going to hide out, because it's just impossible. It's not possible for them to do it, because as a team, you'd be like, hey, you're holding all of us back and you hold each other accountable. So in essence, you go from having one boss to having the entire team be your boss, which creates even more accountability than a lot of companies think, oh, we have to have someone in charge. the opposite happens.
However, it's very difficult. Giving feedback is probably more difficult than taking it, right? Because in my own case, I see something happening, and I see something happening. I get more and more angry about it. So I explode, and then it's no longer feedback. I'm just yelling at people. Whereas if it's we have a workshop, right, that we give on a regular basis on how to give feedback, and it's like I need to take it every week because I need to remind myself of how to do it right. So it is difficult, but it starts with you. It's your job. We had a situation where we had a guy that was not coming through, and somebody talked to him, and it turned out that he was being very depressed and was self-medicating, and we had to get his parents to come pick him up, and he's been a star since he got back on his feet. But here's a case where we thought we were dealing with a problem, and it was his problem, and we were able to help him. So yeah, but it is difficult. It's not easy.
It is really difficult, and I think it's worth mentioning that at Nearsoft we have a pretty lengthy onboarding process, right, to help people adjust to this co-management environment and other things. And one of those very important classes in our onboarding process is the feedback process. We talk specifically about this, and I think that's another thing that companies can take into consideration or need to take into consideration is how they can begin training, right, their employees in those types of soft skills and things that are necessary as well.
Laura, I think there was a couple of questions from the audience that we haven't addressed yet. Something about what happened. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, she was asking. One of the questions is
what happened. What happened
for us as a working from home company, or companies like us? How do they know when it's the right time to stop work or working at the office? I guess given a certain environment like the one we're in right now. I know what my answer would be, but I'm going to let Matt take that one.
No, go ahead with your answer, because I'm the worst person in the world to deal with that. I go on until I hear Anita, my wife, saying, "Can you come out, or are you going to live in there?" And oh yeah, I got to come out. So no, I'm really bad at it. But people talk about Pomodoro practices and having a timer, all kinds of things. But go ahead, please. What's your answer?
No, I think that's actually similar to what you were saying. This idea of trying your best to keep to a certain schedule, getting up at similar times, showering, all those types of things. As a mother, that actually works in my favor because I no longer have to wake up my children or actually, commute them to school or whatever. So I actually get some productive hours in the morning if I can get myself out of bed and not take advantage of I get to sleep in. The Pomodoro is actually really good. And I think that's another thing for people when you have other people at home with you, right? You can use that method and do some of those, productive things during that break time, like prepare a meal or wash some dishes or something of that sort. Have those conversations with your spouse or partner. We have our own tool, actually, right, Tomotoro, to help with the Pomodoro method as well.
I'll add.
The final end. Oh, we'll let you answer that, and then we have, I think, one more question. Is we're actually coming to the end of our half hour today.
Yeah, I was just going to add. I'm guilty as charged of not knowing when to stop, and to go back to the earlier comment about establishing healthy boundaries with your family members. It's also important to establish healthy boundaries with your own relationship and with your work schedule, because otherwise you'll just keep going nonstop, and it's important to have a beginning and an end. Somebody had an additional question about how do you track the hours, the effective hours of work? And Matt, you have an opinion on that? I got my own opinion on that, but I'd love to hear yours.
Why would you want to track? I mean, for an individual to track when to stop and when to, that's important. But who wants to track hours? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, again, going back to this paradigm of managing people and time instead of managing to accomplishing a mission together. Who cares if it takes 10 hours or 5 hours, right?
Controlling behavior is not even managing. That's not managing. That's controlling behavior. And
Yeah.
if you want to know how many hours I worked, what's the number that you like? 8? I worked 8 hours. It doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
So I don't know where the question comes from, but if it is from a personal point of view, yeah, it's important that you don't work to exhaustion, and you don't work to the detriment of your family, and you don't work with, so again, forget the hours, forget the time. Sometimes the last couple of days I probably worked 10 hours a day, probably more than that. As you know, Tulio, I'm writing a book on the whole business of co-management and co-ownership, and I was like in my zone. But I rested, I ate well, I watched some TV and stuff like that. But yeah, I was here many hours.
Yeah. Well, we're up on time.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. And it's really purpose versus organization. You don't manage people, manage to outcomes, and give people reason to participate voluntarily into that purpose, which is why we encourage people to work together and have team meetings and jointly agree to what needs to be accomplished on a weekly basis, pretty much the way it's done in the agile environment. We're up on time, but I encourage anyone who's listened or to check back on next Monday. We'll do a recap of this and highlight the key points. So if you've missed some of those points, not to worry. We will do that in a 10-minute recap on Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Any other, Carlos, who's joining us next Wednesday?
Tulio, next Wednesday, we are going to be having a conversation with Sean Massa, the CTO of a platform called Flash Recruit. And this is going to be interesting for all those recruiting folks, because it's about strength finding interviews. Okay, so it's interviews focused on finding the candidates' strengths. And we're going to be talking about highlighting candidates at their best to reduce bias and gatekeeping in hiring. So there you go. That's next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, right here on Dojo Live.
Matt, thank you for joining us today, and thank you all for joining. And for the audience, we hope you got some value from this. And until the next time.
See you next time. See you next week.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Laura's kid.